Good afternoon, guys. Welcome to the Heal Project's Meet a Pro, where the Heal Project invites professionals from within the community, from many facets of community and business, to talk about their vocation, their work, and their life. So my name is Niccolo Go from the Go Creative Group. It's a creative company that's based right here in Visalia, California. I produce videos and photography and media campaigns for companies with purpose. And I've been doing that for about 7 years now. I've been in Visalia for about 16 years. I grew up in New Jersey and the Philippines, and now I'm here. I call the Central Valley home, and I love it. These are the young people that are here to join me today to basically kind of grill me a little bit on, what I do for work and how I do what I do and how I got started and how it's currently going. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Annalissa, and I am a high school student. I'm 16 years old, and yeah, that's really about it. It's about me.
Hello, my name is Diego Vasquez. I go by he, him, it, and I'm going to be a senior at Golden West this year. I am 17. And then over here we have...
Hi, my name is McKayla. I also attend Golden West High School. I am 17 years old.
First of all, I'm just honored and pleased to be among the three of you, and hopefully I can tell you a little bit about my work and how I do it.
So the first question we have here is, why is a college education important to you, and is it necessary in your field or area of work?
So college education, for the field that I'm in, I actually didn't go to college for media. I went to college for economics, and But I've always had this, passion for visual arts and art in general. I actually wanted to be an illustrator out of high school, but as many immigrant parents they are often very much against a career in the arts, because they're like, well, how can you possibly make any money, drawing? I wanted to be an illustrator. So they discouraged me highly from that. So they're like, you're going to become, a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. I went to college, did economics, because I didn't want to do, they didn't want me to do art, and I didn't want to be a doctor at the time. Now, your question is it important in our particular field? I think it really depends on, one, the individual, and what you're going to do specifically, because media is a pretty broad topic. Let me tell you how I got into it. About 7 years ago, I was in a different business. I was in a family business where we helped take care of people. We had a home care business, a home care company. And we were serving lots of families here in the Central Valley. But I always found myself being good at the marketing of things and the sales and marketing of things. Like, I created the logo, I did the website, I did all of the design work, because that's kind of what's always, part of maybe my natural talents, right? And we all have some of that, right? Like, some of us are love cooking, some of us love drawing, some of us love arguing, and some of us really love biology, right? So it's when you find that thing, I think that gives you an insight into hey, what type of vocation should I enter? If you have an inclination towards something. And in my case, it was really the visual arts. So when I got into it, I was already doing business. I've always been in a sales and marketing function at work, even my first couple of jobs. And at a certain point, I wanted to make a change. I said, I want to do more of that, kind of the visual medium. So what I did was I gave up my business. I slowly let it phase out, and I started vlogging on YouTube, and it was about this region in this area. So I started a vlog called Joaquin Around, and it was about the Central Valley, and basically exploring the best food, art, music, and entertainment in the valley. So I did a YouTube channel, and I did terribly at first. I wasn't... Because you're figuring it out and you're learning it for yourself. So I learned a lot on my own for about the first 2 years, and I was still doing my other business. I developed a website around it, and then little by little, I would have companies that would either DM me or contact me through, because they knew me from the community, and they say, hey, you know what, we're an electrical company, but we need somebody to make some video for Facebook or Google Ads. And I'd be like, yeah, sure, I can make that for you. And slowly I started to do more of this type of work, basically capturing either commercials or content for other companies. And that's how I got my foot in the door, basically vlogging at first, which nowadays you can do on Instagram, you can do on TikTok, Threads, all of these different platforms. And you basically practice that craft until you become good at it. And how do you know you're good at it? Because you have engagement, interaction, followers, so that's how it got started. So to your question, is it necessary to go to college? I think it depends on what you're going to be doing. And if you can find a path without having to go to college, it's definitely doable in media. If you want to become like a media persona, for example, and let's say you have a passion for, I don't know, knitting or something, and you're like, I'm going to develop a whole product line and a persona and a brand around these, fluffy sweaters that I'm making, you can totally do that, and give it a try.
Is there anything that you wish you knew before you went into your profession?
In terms of wish I knew, I will say this. I don't know if there's anything that I wish I knew, but you learn so much along the way as you're doing it, I would say, since I was kind of a self-starter, I wanted to learn the process, and really suck along the way. I think if there was something that I'm glad I didn't know, is that like those first pieces of content really suck, because I was making like long form YouTube, and they're kind of, now that I watch them, they're like, I think for the moment they're okay because you're really putting in an effort. So I would say there wasn't something that I wish I knew, and I'm glad I didn't know, because if somebody had told me like, you're gonna make YouTube and it's gonna suck, I might not do it. So in a way, it's good to not know and just do, and really make the mistakes and learn. Like, editing is a big deal. Knowing how to shoot is a big deal. So when you start doing those things, you're going to discover what you don't know. And I hope that doesn't really answer your question, but I would say there wasn't anything that I wish I knew, but I learned a lot along the way.
No, yeah, you're good. Is there anything that you necessarily feel that people who go into your profession should know about before going into it?
That's a good question. I think when you let's break it down. Like, I think if you want to be a creator, for example, on any of these platforms, I think consistency of content is very important. Making sure that whatever it is you're showcasing, as a creator, you do that consistently. You present it in its best light. So I think one of the things I really developed as I became a creator was like like, how do you project a persona, across the screen? I think when we're first starting off, we haven't found our legs yet, or what that persona is like. So I think it's really about exploring it, which is, in a sense, it's kind of an interesting process, because you do something like we're communicating now through the internet, and we're gonna potentially watch this later, and we're gonna be like, well, that's how I come off, on video. Like, wow, I should have worn a different shirt, or I shouldn't have smiled so much. Shouldn't have worn that hat, Like, we're very self-critical, but I think that can be a good thing, because eventually what you end up doing is, like, if you have a certain goal of being a creator, you figure out what that persona that you want to put out into the world is. And that really takes time. So I think one of the things that I would say is, like, be consistent, take your time with it, learn and evolve. Those are kind of some quick ones, I think I would say. Yeah.
So is there anything you wish you could change about your field of work?
It's very much a challenge every day. It's always different. I don't think there's anything I would change from the field of work, especially like if you're going to do your own thing, like you're going to be your own business person. The thing you really want is that life and the world changes you. That you continue to evolve as a person, because it's hard for us to really change any part of the world. Like I can say like, oh, I wish, I wish, I don't know, projects were easier. That's just not going to be true. Like we get into this because we're picking the challenge we want in our life. And for me, it's like, oh, I want to face communication challenges. That's ultimately like what clients come to me to say. We're like, hey, we have a communication challenge. Can you help us with it? And you have to be ready for that difficulty, because obviously they've not figured it out. They either don't have the talent or the skill set within their own organization. They haven't spent the time to do it. And those are the problems I want to solve for them. So I don't think there is one thing that I would change. I think change is good, and if anything, we change along with our vocation and our profession. Yeah.
Have you ever found yourself in a creativity burnout where you just felt like stuck and that you just wanted to give up in that very moment, and how did you overcome it?
Right. I think this is a question for creatives in general, right? Whether you're like a writer, a painter, any kind of musician, and you're a creative, I think any type of a burnout is always going to happen. I think for me, it's stepping back, and from it, I think taking a real break from things is really important, which I've done lately. And I think sometimes that's a little scary when you're a creative to kind of take a break from it, because it's often the thing that you love, and you're like, how could I have burnout from this? Like, it's kind of a scary thing to like run out of ideas when something kind of is so close to you. I think as creatives, it's a little bit different from, let's say, a non-creative field, because I think a non-creative field, let's say I did become a doctor. And not to say that doctors don't have burnout, but their burnout's quite different. Their burnout is because like families are, giving them a lot of stress. Patients' families are giving them a lot of stress. They're working long hours. They're working with people's lives. So it's a very different kind of burnout. I think for creatives, it's often like, whether it's like a writer's block or lacking the motivation to be creative, is a scary kind of thought to have, because you're like, wow, because it often feels like it's coming from yourself, and it really isn't. But I think it's like a form of fatigue. So I think if one is experiencing some sort of creative block or burnout, the best thing to do, for me anyway, from my experience, is really to step away from it, be comfortable with like not doing that thing for a while. And you're not giving it up for good, but I think give it up for some time, step away from it, take a breather, do other things that you enjoy doing, cook or go take a walk in the woods, spend time with your family, and then return to it. And I think you'll have a fresher outlook. Yeah.
That being said, during that time off, what do you typically find yourself doing?
Quite a lot of things. One of them is camping and hiking and spending time outdoors. I just came back from a family camping trip in Big Bear down in Southern California, where we actually saw a rattlesnake in our campground that we just talked about earlier. And it was gigantic. It was like a 4-footer. And according to the rangers that were there that took it from our campground, it was the biggest of the season. So that's kind of fun. Like, as long as nobody gets hurt, right? We also did like some off-roading. So we did some off-roading, some camping. We jumped in Big Bear Lake. I do love the outdoors, so I'm hiking and camping quite a bit during the spring, summer, and the fall, definitely. So I love that. I love like spending time with my family. Cooking, listening to music, hanging out with friends. So yeah, kind of the stuff that other people like to do also.
Yeah, totally. And on your Instagram, we do see a lot of those videos of you going on hikes and stuff. We also see you typically highlighting like local Central Valley restaurants. Why is it important to you to visit those local restaurants?
The beginning of walking around is I had moved here from New Jersey, and here's an interesting thing about the place we live in. You know, here in the Central Valley, we're the middle of the agricultural center of the world, and you know, when you ask people like, "Hey, what's there to do here?" Even the people that have grown up here and are local, they're like, "Nothing," you know. And as somebody at that point, I consider myself a local now, but as somebody that just transplanted here, I was kind of like a disappointing answer from like, oh my God, what did I move into? But what I slowly discovered by like just being here and making friends is that that's just not true. Now, are the things that are, quote, to do here different from LA, New York, Las Vegas? Of course. This is not those places, but it doesn't mean that this place isn't full of quote things to do. There is like culture, art, food, music here. So that's how I got started doing, you know, like going to restaurants and highlighting them for people, because these are the places that I enjoyed. You know, if you think about the Central Valley, we have a rich culture that is, you know, Mexican, Filipino, Dutch, Portuguese, Oklahomans, you know, other peoples from Europe, native peoples, you know, that are from here, you know, the Tool, the Yokut Indians, and, you know, African Americans that are also part of this place. So there's really a rich culture here, but I think it's a matter of, are we engaging it? So, you know, when I think about like when people say like, you know, why did you start doing what you do in Joaquin? I really saw that there was like a void. And when I asked that question, like, hey, what is there to do here? I really found the answers to be lacking. And I'm like, let me answer it for myself, you know. So that's how I got started doing that. Yeah.
Would you say that you have any like life mottos that you go by?
You know, I went to a friend's housewarming party just yesterday, and one of the women there had a tattoo on her arm. I can't say it's my life motto because I just saw it yesterday, but it was really interesting. It was in an Indian language, like East Indian. She was Punjabi, and she said it was in the language. And I asked her, I'm like, that's a really cool tattoo. What does it mean? And she said, it means be grateful and have no fear. And it felt appropriate for that moment, you know. It felt appropriate for that moment because, you know, I had been struggling with something too personally, you know, let's call it like you know, something that was challenging my own confidence in myself, you know. And I think we all have this in our life, right? There's always moments where, you know, self-doubt creeps in. Can I do it? And I was having some of these kind of thoughts in the last, let's say, few months. And when she said that to me, she's like, yeah, it's actually very much a part of our tradition. You know, she's from Punjab in India, and she felt close enough to put it as a tattoo. So it may be a new motto for me because I just discovered it yesterday. But be grateful and have no fear, you know. And I think if we can approach life that way, we can take each step a little bit bolder, you know. I thought there it is. Be bold. Be bold. I'm like, no, this is we will walk with you. No, here it is. Yeah.
So as somebody who's grown up with a lot of women in my life, like a lot of really strong women, I've always been told, like, be your own voice. And that was kind of like something that a mentor taught me that stuck with me. What is something that a mentor taught you that stuck with you?
Embrace the mistakes. I had our art teacher, Mr. Bates, love Mr. Bates, redheaded Irish guy with a beard, very enthusiastic, and you'd be drawing, right, and you're trying to be all precise, with your drawing, and he'd be like, loosen up, like loosen up a little bit. And actually, like, it's okay to be a little bit random, especially when you're a creative, and if you make a mistake with your pencil, like, let it happen, because you might discover that it's going to create a form that is going to really add to your piece. So I think that's an important lesson, especially if you enter a creative field. You can kind of plan things on paper, and this happens definitely on my projects. You'd be like, hey, a company comes to me and they say, hey, we want to do, a communication for, X event or product or our brand, and we want it to be this way, and we kind of do an analysis, like, okay, well, who's the audience? What do you want to say? What are you trying to convey, or what are you trying to sell, so to speak? And, what do you want to be the result? We do an analysis, right? And we kind of like make a plan. I was like, oh, this is the way we want to create the content. Oftentimes, by the time you do your analysis, create a script and a plan, and actually shoot it, it looks very different from the way you initially thought it was going to go. And it's not because you made mistakes, but it's because you discovered in the refinement process how you actually want it to come out. Meaning you find opportunities to make the thing you're doing better by being open to other ideas, potential mistakes, that, are not really mistakes. They're actually opportunities, but it's in those things that you can really find some magical things. So embrace the mistakes, Mr. Bates, art class. See, I think I was a freshman in high school.
Is there anything throughout your career or just in your personal life, a moment that you wanted to give up? And what are some examples of this, and how did you overcome that issue?
Yeah, probably quite a few things. I would say, I'll go back to the story. I was a sophomore in high school, and go back to the way I grew up. My grandparents were interesting, and they're the ones that raised me. They thought like sports was a real waste of time. They're like, no, it's academics. When you grow up kind of like a poor immigrant, it's like sports are like nonsense. It's like, why even get into that? So they were always like, don't play any sports. It's useless. So my sophomore year in high school, I really wanted to play a sport, and at that point, it was going to be wrestling. I felt like that was going to be something I could get into. Because I hadn't really played like football or baseball because my grandparents forbade me. So I had no real competitive experience. So trying to do that in high school at this point and play in the team was like, I'd be like, what do they say, a fish out of water. So I ended up forging my grandparents' signature on all of the permission slips and the health record stuff. And I'm like, I'm just going to do it. So, and then they're like, oh, why are you coming home late nowadays? I'm like, oh, I've got choir. I got choir. Yeah, I got choir. But I was actually at wrestling practice. The first couple weeks of wrestling practice, I literally almost passed out. Because of wrestling's hard. It's a hard sport. Like if you yourself or have friends that do it, they'll tell you it's going to be the most challenging sport that you can get into in any grade. People start when they're very young, but when I got started into it, I was a little bit later. Some of the kids have been wrestling for a long time. They were very good, so I was getting beat up quite a bit in practice, and it just exhausted at the end of it. And I remember one time I was waiting for the bus to take us home, and it's already dark. This is back in New Jersey, and I could feel my life like exiting me. Like I'm like, okay, I think I'm gonna die. And I think I was just like exhausted, dehydrated. Like my vision was tunneling, and it was becoming darker. And I'm just like, I better breathe. So I started breathing, and I got home that day. I was okay. I made it on the bus. I crawled onto the bus, like just exhausted and beat up. And I thought to myself, I think this isn't for me. I think I better quit. you know, like I don't want to, you know, pass out tomorrow, you know, and this is only like the first week of practice. And I'm like, I think I'm going to quit. So I go to school the next day and I'm like, I'm going to tell the coach that this is it for me, you know. And as I was about to tell the coach that day that I wanted to quit, and you know how coaches are, like you're coming into the locker room, it's like, all right, everybody get in, you know, get into your practice gear, let's go, we've got a long day, long practice, we're going to do some hard stuff today. And I ended up not saying I was quitting that day. And I'm just like, because you just kind of like get rushed into the day. And I'm just like about to tell them, and I'm just like, screw it. I'm just gonna stay. I'm gonna stay for today, one more day. And I'm glad I did. You know, whether or not it was because I chose it or it was just because I got rushed into the locker room and they're like, let's get going. Like, you know, shut up and let's go. But no, I ended up sticking with it. I ended up making the varsity team, and it wasn't a winning record. I think it was like 5-10 for for the season. But you know what? It taught me a lot about that whole experience. At the moment where you're about to give up, a lot of times you're only a couple steps to doing it right. So I think the lesson is like when you're challenged with that feeling, like, oh man, I think this is a bad point, I think I might quit. Feel that, accept that, yes, you're in a tough position, and then take the next step forward, you know. And sometimes, yes, is there a time where you need to quit? Yes. But I think sometimes you have to forge forward. So, yeah, take the next step is my thing.
So with all the work that you do, are there any self care moments that you take back home, or just any maybe niche things that you do for self-care?
Wow, that's a good question. I like that because I think it's such an important topic, and it's definitely, self-care. It's become more of a thing. Our parents and our grandparents did not have that word. They're like, what, self-care? Get to work. Shut your mouth. Do your homework, clean your room, get into the field, do what you need to do. I don't think there was a thing of self, at least not the word, So I think for me, one more than ever is nutrition. We eat every day, and more than anything else we do, it affects our lives, what we eat. So for me, it's always is what I'm eating going to give me the best building blocks and the best fuel? So for me, that's become sharper focus. I had a health scare at the beginning of the year. Believe it or not, I had a heart attack, back in January. Yeah. And it changed, the way I look at health, especially, looking fairly fit as I do, and also doing what fit people do, like working out, hiking. But I think the food aspect is really important. So I think one is making sure the things you put into your body are of the highest quality is come into sharper focus. So that's one. Two is really knowing how to, and I think we brought it up, is knowing how to unplug, relax, and really take the time to rest and shut down. And I wasn't good at those things. So I really take the time now I was doing those things, but I was actually kind of feeling guilty. I'm going to take a week-long vacation. And in the back of my mind, I'm still thinking about work, So now I'm being more intentional about those things. So I think putting the things in our body that are of the highest quality and knowing how to take rest is vitally important. Yeah.
For youth who don't know where to start in media, but they want to pursue it, what's your best starting piece of advice?
Yeah. more than ever, in this age, if you're out there and you're like, hey, I want to get started in media, one, use your phone. If you have a phone that has a camera, whatever version of it, even our boy Freddie over there with his iPhone 8, he can do it too. And, just get started, one, on your phone, use it. You want to have a podcast? There's an app on the phone now where you can do a whole podcast on your phone. So there really isn't a barrier, Secondly, distribution. There's making the content and distributing the content. So you have all of these platforms, whether it's, YouTube, Vimeo, TikTok, Thread, Facebook, Instagram, all of those things. You can utilize all those things. So it's really like get started, and then like our friend, my teacher, Mr. Bates said, is, embrace the mistakes. Embrace the mistakes. So that would be my my things to do. Yeah.
So we did hear that you have like a documentary pilot coming up. Is there anything that you can tell us about that today?
Yeah, that's my colleagues and I, right before the pandemic, made a 30-minute documentary about Visalia. Yeah, and it's called This Is Home, because this is home to me, And basically, it is an exploration of Visalia through the eyes of the people that live here, through food, art, and culture, and what makes this place home for these people, And we kind of start off with a conversation around food. So I meet my friends at kind of like the places we all go to get some food, Not all of them. I think we go to like 4 places. And we talk about, why they love that place, but we also talk about like what makes this home for some people. And for some, it's because this is a place where you can try things, this is a place where you can get support to try things, like you can have a support group. And it's also like not such a big and competitive place. Like if you were living in a big city where you would feel like, there's 100 creators on the block. Like if you wanted to be a creator here for this thing that you do, like maybe you make mugs. Guess what? There aren't 100 people making mugs here. You can make a local impact and use that success to create a national impact or even bigger. So right now I was in front, I've taken that pilot and put it in front of a couple executives to see if it's something that we can distribute more widely. But it's something that I think we will release on like YouTube and Vimeo before the end of the year. Just on that, like even if we're not able to sell it, like it'll still exist out there on the web. It's not out yet, but hopefully by the end of the year. It's called This Is Home, and it's about Visalia. And our hope is to create other episodes talking about other small cities and rural communities where culture happens, actually. So this isn't the only place like this. And there's here's a statistic you might not know of, but half of the United States population actually lives in places that we live in, small cities and rural areas. Half of it, yeah. So there's a whole culture that half of us are living in that people don't know about, because people think like, oh, culture is only made in like New York, LA, Chicago, Dallas. It's not true.
Since we've been asking you all these questions, do you have any questions for us?
I'm glad we got to this moment here, because this is the important part, I think, more than my work. For you guys, like, with now that we have so much access to like media making tools, and how do you think about meaning you can also get an education without going to a physical place now, meaning you can sign up for courses, you can even do school completely online now. How do you guys think about how you're gonna educate yourselves and then move into a career? How do you guys think about that now? Like, are you thinking about college in terms of physical places, or are you looking at the alternatives as well?
For me, I think I'm looking at both, really, because there's a lot of, like, we have a lot of access to, like, so many things. Like, even as somebody who does, like, performing arts, I have a lot of access to, like, tutorials online for stuff. Like, even just learning how to, like, create a choreography and whatnot. Like, I have classes available to me online for that, and I don't need to attend like a physical school for that, and I can just do it from home. But I'm also thinking about college in terms of like, okay, I want to be able to work with a team. I want to be able to work with a mentor, like stuff like that. In terms of like, I don't know. I feel like a mentorship can, like in person, can be a little more beneficial, in terms of, you know, you're seeing this person almost every day, and you can learn from them, and you can ask like your specific questions that maybe not many people online had, and that's why it's not answered.
For me personally, I didn't know what I wanted to do after high school until like last month. I always really knew that I was more like a people person, but like recently I really found my passion for like working with youth and stuff like that. So I'm looking for college programs for teaching, and I've been looking at youth development specifically in sociology. I wouldn't take an online class if I could do it in person, because again, I'm a people person. Like I like doing stuff in person, because during COVID and all that, I didn't really like the whole Zoom thing. I feel like I was learning way less than I would in person.
For me, I'd say like traditionally, like college has always been like what I wanted to do, but also like there's still options for me to like not go to college and do other things and pursue like media, for example, and like really like work to do something other than just like the traditional sense of college, because I personally like being in person as well. So
that's great. You know, I'm glad that you know, coming from your guys' generation, that you still value like the in-person experience. I've always felt that way, and I think yes, there are opportunities to definitely learn things remotely now. So many, and I think those are great, because I think it gives us opportunities. For example, if there's a program that's out of Florida, you know, that you want to learn about, but it's like, hey, you know what, if I lived in Florida, housing plus the tuition is going to be astronomical, and maybe it's outside of my current, you know, financial capability, then it makes sense to be like, hey, let me go online. But I think if it's within, you know, if it's within our capabilities, whether it's, you know, I got to take 3 jobs to do it and do it physically, I think there's a real value to going to a place. Plus, like I always say, there's like incidental contact when you're in a physical place. Like, you know, like there are just things, one, that we can pick up from each other, body language, energy, that isn't available when it's online. And then 2, it's like things happen when we just bump into each other. Like I'm going to class and I run into this person and they're like, oh no, I didn't know that was happening. Let me go with you. And that can't happen when we're not sharing the same space. So I think I'm glad you guys are thinking of it in a very hybrid way. Like, hey, you know, I can, and you said performing arts. That's a very much a physical type of presence kind of a thing. But you also realize that you can take instruction and mentorship and classes remotely if needed, but nonetheless, the performance of your art is a very physical type of thing. So I'm glad you guys are definitely thinking of it from a hybrid type of perspective. Yeah. What kind of challenges are you guys having in terms of, I know, Diego, you were saying you hadn't really thought of what you might do after high school. And that's challenging sometimes, because I think there's pressure to like, oh, I need to know what I'm doing. And I don't think you really need to. Like, I don't think I chose economics as a major until I was like, you know, second year in college. And I was naturally, I really was interested in economics. It wasn't just like a thing to do. But like for you guys, like what kinds of challenges are you facing in terms of navigating like life, especially as it comes to career? You know, what kind of challenges are you facing there?
I feel like pressure is a lot of like pressure from grandparents, pressure from your peers, pressure from everybody around you really is like a big challenge, especially for my age group, because we're not exactly, so I'm going to be a junior in high school, and we're not exactly like there yet to know what we're going to do, but we have so much pressure on us to like get your grades up, make sure you're not make sure your grades aren't slipping, know what you want to do, have the money for it. Like we have so much pressure on all of us, and I feel like that's like the biggest challenge for everybody really.
Yeah. Can I follow up on that? How do you kind of mitigate that, or how do you overcome some of that pressure that you're feeling?
I personally overcome it is just thinking like, okay, but this isn't what they're doing. I'm gonna do something for me, not for them. Like, I'm not my grandparents. I love my grandparents, do not get me wrong, but I'm not my grandparents. I'm not my friends. Like, I gotta think for me only. And I've kind of learned how to like navigate through that, because at first I was very impressionable. So like, if somebody told me to do something, I'd be like, oh, okay. But now I'm like, wait, but I don't want to do that. So I think that's how I've kind of alleviated that pressure.
Gotcha.
I'm gonna piggyback off her a bit. A lot of it for me, the same thing is about like academic pressure with my parents, and just like the way that they got brought up. Like you touched on it earlier with the immigrant parents, and how they usually want you to have like a normal job, like a doctor, lawyer, stuff like that. The way I deal with it, I try to surround myself with the right people who are going to support me in what I want to do. Like Heal, they offer really great resources for that. The staff is incredible. They help us with stuff like that.
Very nice.
That being said, like she said, I'm not my parents. Like I'm forever gonna be grateful for my last name. They gave me that last name. They gave me my first name. But recently on a camping trip, there was this staff member named Sal. He gave like this whole like philosophical like speech, and I really like what he said. He said that our parents gave us our last name, so that's like our ancestry, but our first name is where we make our stamp and on the world with ourselves. You know, and yeah, I think it's just really important to surround yourself around the right people and just do what you want to do if you have the opportunity. I think that's very important, that some people don't necessarily say. They just tell you to do what you want to do, but they don't really understand like the circumstances that people are in, and I think it's very important to keep those in mind.
Right. So like personally, like I tend to like go to like my interests and my hobbies of like, oh, like what do I like doing, and I really enjoy like baking or cooking, and I enjoy photography, and I enjoy like people. I enjoy people. So it's just like oh, like there are potential things of what I can do and pressure of like what I need to do, and there's just so many options for me. Like it's just really hard to like crank it down to a couple. So that's like just what's going on in my mind recently for my senior year.
That's a fun time, you know, senior year, or in your case, you're a junior, you're right, junior year, yeah. You're a senior too. Yeah. So this is definitely a time of decision making, you know. I think you touched on something that is important to return to, is like the idea of many choices is just as difficult as having very few. You know, and I think we're lucky to have many choices, right? But then it's like, what do you do? You know, like we talked about like kind of like natural gifts, talents, or inclinations, and like what do you pursue if it's like, oh, you know, I love people and I love interacting with people. I love media, but I also love to cook. And then, you know, which ones of those things do I pursue? I think is a nice problem to have. So I think don't fret it. You know, don't fret it. Like, I could do so much. It's not anything to fret about. But if I can give you some guidance there, it is to, if you are serious about something that you have an inclination towards, whether it's the performing arts or like, you know, being an advocate or mentor for young people, or in your case, maybe media, is like, as you, at this stage in your lives, you have the energy of a billion suns in you. So when you have it, this thing, like whatever that seed of this power is, this inclination you have, go for it now. Go for it now, because you really have the energy, you know, of 1,000 suns. So it's like, you want to do media, do it now, make the most mistakes as possible, be bold in it. You know, whatever it is, like you want to work with young people, involve yourself, do it now, because this is really the moment to learn all of those things. You know, if it's performing or it's, do it. You know, get excited about the fact that you have many opportunities. Don't look at it as a, oh my God, what do I do? It's like, holy cow, I have so many opportunities. I'm totally going to crush them all and figure out which ones I suck at, and either do better at those things or give some of them up. And like, you know what? I'm just going to do that as a hobby. I'm not going to do that as a vocation. Why? Because here's something that you'll find out. Sometimes there are certain things that we actually are good at that should remain hobbies, because once you start doing them for work, it's not fun anymore. You're like, oh, I used to like cooking, but you know what? Now that I started a taco shop, I hate it. It's like, this is not cool. Like, I don't want to do this. Why? Because I gotta make the same thing all the time. I get demanding customers, and because when you take something that is a hobby into to work, there's a different set of constraints to it. There's a different expectation now. Like, you make it into a business, it's like, oh, well, I got to deliver the same thing all the time now. That's not why I got into cooking. I got into cooking because it tastes good. You know what I mean? So I think that would be my 2 cents around this. It's like this idea of like, hey, I'm having a struggle. I think embrace the struggle and go through it with like all of the energy that you've got, because you're not going to have the type of boldness and energy and frankly kind of the naivete that you have now. That's actually an advantage. Like, as we get older, we are actually start to form a version of the world in our mind, and that often involves a little bit of fear, because some of us have already been burnt along the way. So we're less likely to try as we get older. We're less likely to be bold. So I think in your case, like, this kind of innocence and naivete that you have and all this energy, F it. Go for it. Yeah. Yeah, and we're about to, zoom into the world of Instagram here for the Heal Project. But hey, guys, thank you for having me here. Annalissa, Diego, McKayla. And thanks for having me here for Meet the Pro here at the Heal Project. I think there's more to this series. We've got Dulce coming up next week that's going to do an amazing talk, I'm sure. She's a very talented architect. I loved architects growing up. They make such not only useful stuff, but very beautiful things, So stay tuned here to the Heal Project. Thanks for having me, guys. I hope this was helpful. You can reach out to at the Heal Project, me at Joaquin.around on Instagram, or at the Go Creative Group on Instagram as well for my professional work. Thanks for having me. Peace.